The challenges facing our teens today mean that more than ever, we need to be there to support them and encourage them. The DrStem Show is here to provide discussions about topics that will help promote healthy relationships, self-image, and success for teens, parents, and the community. Our young people can achieve more in life than they ever dreamed possible. The DrStem Show, hosted by Dr. Stem Malatini, will foster these discussions and encourage your participation.
Maturity and experience. Did you know that no matter how much a parent or a teenager thinks that they are mature, that they still require experience and maturity in order for the parent to raise a teenager that can grow up to be a responsible adult? So today we do have one that has experience as a teenager herself, as a mother herself, and a grandmother. We do have on our show today Mrs. Audrey Ruffin. Welcome to the DrStem Show, and welcome, Mrs. Ruffin.
Thank you.
So what I want to do is I'm going to have Mrs. Ruffin introduce herself so she can tell us her background and who she is.
I'm Audrey E. Ruffin. My E is for Eleanor. And I was born in New York City the same day as the St. Valentines Day Massacre. And my mother brought me back to Salem, and I lived in Salem for 7 years. And then I became a state ward and went to live with the Callaways, where I spent 10 years of my life with my brother and my 2 sisters. And after living there and growing up and making friends and having a good time, I went to work.
Yes.
But in those days, you couldn't work in an office. You had to work in a factory. And so I worked in shoe factories for a few years in Salem, Lynn, Chelsea. And when they closed, I went to work in a stamp company, the largest stamp company in the world, U.S. H.E. Harrison Company. And I worked there about 15 years. And then they chose to go to Derry, New Hampshire, and I came into Lynn and worked at 9X. And I worked there a couple of years until they were having strikes. And I said I couldn't afford not to be working because I had my children. And after that, I got a job in Eastern Bank, where I worked until I retired 2 months before I was 75. Meanwhile, I had my children, 5 of them, and I worked every day. I very seldom took time off. And things were different then. Everything was cheaper. Nothing was like it was today.
Yeah. So I'm going to rewind with you so we can go all the way back to the part where you said you were born and raised in New York. Were your parents from New York, both of them?
No, my mother came to this country from the Dutch West Indies when she was 17. I only knew my mother. I did not know my father.
Okay. So she was a teenager when she had you, or when she came?
No, she didn't have us till she was about 25 when she had my brother. My brother was the oldest, then I came. My mother had 16 kids.
She had 16 kids?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought 7, 8 was a lot. 16 from one one womb?
All single pregnancies too.
16?
16 of us.
So I guess it makes sense when you say things were cheap, because you couldn't have 16 kids in today's world.
Well, my mother really couldn't take care of us because she was having us every year. Yeah. And in them days, they didn't give out welfare in those days.
Yeah.
You had to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
So, and then she got married, and the 4 of us went on the state.
Oh, so that's when you went in, under the state, now into foster care, because there were so many of you, and she got married.
Yes, she got married.
Okay. And you went into foster care at age 10, you said? Or
7.
At 7, and you stayed there for 10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
Correct.
There was another thing that you said that I wanted to also clarify, because I probably know teenagers, or somebody that listening. When you talk about Valentine's, I think of celebrating hearts and love, but you spoke about a massacre.
Yes, it was.
So
it's a famous massacre.
yeah, and that's why I'm saying for the teenagers that are listening now, and some foreigners that don't know about that massacre. If it didn't happen in Africa, we have no idea what that is.
Right, that's true.
You see, so
Yep.
if you can tell the audience as well, what was that massacre about?
It was like the mafia and the gangs were fighting with one another, and one group of the gang, I can't think of the names right now.
Oh, that's
but
okay.
if I told you.
Yeah.
They were in a garage, and the other guys came in and shot them all down. And it became history.
Oh.
And they've made a movie of it. I watch the movie all the time.
I've never heard
And it's
about
called
it.
the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Now, as of today, I'm going to search it. As you know, we can find anything, but
And I always
didn't know
say,
about
that's
that.
the day I was born.
Yes.
It was in Chicago.
It was in Chicago.
Yep.
Very significant.
Bugs Moran was one of the, there were groups, of gangsters
Yes.
that fought for territory between one another.
Wow. Okay. We learn something every day on the DrStem show. Another thing I wanted you to discuss a little bit more is your time in the foster care. How did you survive that? Were there any challenges, difficulties?
I really don't want to say.
You don't want to say, okay, all right, because I just thought maybe there might be some things
We were
that
brought
you
up
might say.
strict.
Okay.
We couldn't go any place,
Okay.
But I knew one day I was going to be on my own, so I never rebelled.
Yes.
Because there was my brother, my two sisters, and I. Now, my brother went to live somewhere else because something happened, so he graduated in Palmer.
Okay.
And then another family came, and they were two sisters and a brother. I felt bad for them, but
Yeah.
they would do things that I would never do, because I used to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be here forever. One day I'll be on my own.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So I like that attitude, because then if one goes through life knowing that you're not going to be in the same place, the same age forever, you tend to be motivated and driven to do something
Yep.
different. So, I'm sure that's what drove you to find work right after high school, to say, I gotta find something.
My sisters, nobody believed we were sisters, because I went to school and I excelled. My poor sisters, they eventually went to another place for girls.
Okay.
But I always came up on top, because I always felt there was somebody watching over me.
Yes. And that makes a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I never rebelled. I just took my life as it came. I have no regrets.
Yes. You had 5 children, you say.
Yes.
What are their names, and how was it raising?
Kim
Is the
is
oldest.
going to be 60 years old in July. He's right now in the hospital.
Yeah.
My daughter, Michelle, she died 7 years ago.
Yeah.
She would have been 50. She had multiple sclerosis. Then I have Daryl. He lives in Haverhill with his 2 kids. He's 53. Then comes Philip, who's married to your sister.
Yes, Moosey.
He's 51, and he has 2 children, 2 girls, one 11 and one 20 months. And then my youngest daughter, Cherie, she lives in Framingham. She has 2 children, a boy and a girl.
Yes, I must say, we love your family, because very successful children that you raise,
They're
very
always
well
doing
mannered.
well.
Yes.
Right. You know what everybody tells me that knows me and Lynn?
Yeah.
And people that have had 1 child or 2 child, you're the only one that never had problems with your children. And this is true. I have my cousin, she had 2 boys, one's this way and one's that way.
Is that way?
Yep.
And
everybody
what do you
says
attribute that to? How did you...
Because I think because the way I was brought up, strict, I didn't let my kids get away with anything.
Yes.
That's what I believe, really.
What?
And I sent them to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
They went to church.
I'm gonna stop you for a second,
Yep.
because we're gonna take a quick break, and
Yep.
we'll be right back.
As a youth motivational speaker, author, and coach, DrStem understands that in a world where today's youth and parents are jaded and disappointed by institutions and people they perceive as out of touch with the reality of their lives, motivation is a dose that is much needed. It's time to excel. DrStem Malatini is a refreshing change from the typical speaker. DrStem understands the pressures, heartaches, temptations, hopes, and dreams of the generation that is just now coming of age. Students listen in transfixed silence as she speaks with the clarity and confidence of someone who has worked with teens, parents, and teachers for over 20 years. Her high-energy school assembly programs create a defining moment for schools and provide an experience students never forget. To reserve your seat in one of her coaching sessions, purchase her books, or to book her services, email her at drStemMalatini@gmail.com or go to her website at www.drstem.org.
Maturity and experience. As I said at the beginning of the show, we are talking to Mrs. Audrey Ruffin, who's sharing with us her life experience and how it was for her during the time of her teenage years, as well as the time that she raised her own teenagers. So for you teenagers, here is a lady who just told us that right after high school, while she was in foster care, she understood that she had to make the right choices, that she was not going to be in that place forever. So she couldn't rebel, because then she needed to make sure that her path of where she was going, it was all up to her. And she found a job right after that. She also said one important thing that I want to make sure that you as an audience understood, that she said, I always knew that there was somebody up there that was looking on me. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, and that's about your faith.
Yes.
And spirituality.
Yes.
How important was that, or is that even now in your age, and at your age?
I used to tell my mother, things always would turn out. I don't care what happened, things would always turn out. And I used to tell my mother, somebody up there likes me. When I wanted to buy a house, it took me 3 years, but I never gave up, and I found what I wanted. It seemed like everything always turned out for me because I never rebelled or went against what I believed in.
Yes.
And so I had no regrets.
Yeah.
None at all.
So are you a praying woman? Do you believe in God?
Of course.
You do? Okay.
There is a
all
greater
right.
being.
Oh,
yeah.
Because you're saying somebody up there, I'm
That's
wondering.
the somebody up there,
That's the
that
somebody
greater
up
being.
there. Okay.
Right?
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So patience is probably, one thing that
Yes, that's another
got you
thing.
through.
Right. Nothing happens overnight. And when things happen, there's a reason. Like they say, one door closes, another one opens, and that's the truth.
Yes.
Because I remember when I was looking for houses, I went to different places and I would see, but it just wasn't the right place, you know.
Yes.
But I don't know.
You got what you wanted.
Yes.
Now, as far as your work experience, because you said you started working as a teenager at 17 years old, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have a choice to say, I want this kind of office job and I want this? And
We didn't have no choices of office jobs. I told you, you could not work. They did not hire you in an office. That's why you went to work in a shoe factory.
Yes.
But I always did well there too. They put me on a machine and I learned how to bottom cement, which was a job you had to learn.
Yeah.
And everywhere I went, everybody liked me and always gave me,
The high praises.
and top billing. So
Yeah.
I never had a problem. I really never did. And like I said, when the shoe factories closed, they sent me to a school in Chelsea where I learned typing in shorthand.
Okay.
And I went to work, and I was a secretary for the man in H.E.
Yes.
Harris, and him and I used to sit down and talk about life and color and everything.
Yeah.
I always got along with everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Did you, during your time when you were a teenager, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
as I said, I'll be going back and forth because I want this show to be one that educates the teenagers as
Yes,
well as the
okay.
parents. So some of the problems that the teenagers are going through these days, there's a lot of stress that they're going through. Either the parents at home are not getting along, or mom is by herself and she's bringing different boyfriends in the house, or, you know, I mean, there's alcoholism in the house from the parents as well. So that stress alone is too much for, you know, the teenagers. Is that something that you found in your days?
No.
With people struggling
Never.
with that? No.
Never.
Drugs, alcohol?
Never heard of drugs. Never heard of drugs. And the children, if the children did anything that was out of the way, maybe it was smoking.
Yeah.
But otherwise, anything else, I had never heard of. Never heard of
It wasn't
drugs.
as bad as it is today.
Never heard of drugs.
Yeah.
Never heard of them.
When did they start? In the 50s, 60s? I wonder.
I would say yes. But my day, we didn't have that.
You didn't have that.
No.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for me, probably what, 20, 30 years ago, I didn't know either. Maybe I was just naive in Africa, you know, about the drugs and, you know, alcohol. It was just not acceptable in the home, so you couldn't be
Right.
around it and you couldn't go and do it.
Right.
And that's, you know, that was the bottom line. It didn't look like we had any choice. But then today's teenagers, as you know, it's like it's not about the parents. It's about what I choose to do, and it's
Right.
my life, and it's...
But a lot of it today is accredited to the parents to let the kids run their lives or tell them what to do instead of them being the master, the child's telling them what they should be doing and what they want to do, and that's wrong.
But do you think that, you know, because then we have a lot of parents that are getting pregnant at 15,
Oh.
16, and 17, so I think they're almost the same age as the teenager. When, you know, when this kid is 13 years old, mom is probably like 20, you know, in their
Right.
late 20s and want to start living her life now. So
Yeah.
they almost look like they're the same age. Could that be a problem?
Of course it could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the child thinks that the mother's the friend with them, you know, young, and the mother's still young to want to
Yes.
go out and party and have a good time. Yes. So she's not going to give the kid all the, you know, what they need.
Where do they find balance? Because mom is still as young. She wants to date.
Exactly.
And then, you know, the kid wants mommy to be home and to do things with her. Where's the balance? How can they balance that, though?
I have no answer.
Idea.
I have no idea.
And, you know, sometimes it's about that there's no answer except what will work with the family. You know, I mean, as you know, I do counseling with families, and each family is going to be different. So we might discuss here what would work in general for people, but then each family will have to find what works for them. Yeah.
Like I say, in today's world, nobody sends it. They don't send their children to church, which I think they really need to be.
Yes.
To go to church, Sunday school. They really need to be exposed because it makes a big difference in their lives. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And today,
So I think it's going to be, it's probably going to be so independent for each kid to decide that, or each parent, because then the kids are saying, no, I don't want to go to church. I don't even believe in God or anybody in that sense.
but if you're taught from very beginning, you know, when you're young, how could you say this? You know what I'm saying? If a child is taught between the ages of 5 and 6 and you take it to church or send it, he's not going to turn around. He might turn around and rebel if, to a certain extent, some of them might.
Yes.
But if they're used to doing that, then I don't think they're going to rebel.
You're right. You're right. I mean, as I said, we didn't know any other choices except what was acceptable in the house.
Exactly.
You know, so anything else, it wasn't even up to us to say, you know, this is what we want or we don't want this. I just pulled up, when you say that, there's a poem by Ronald Russell. It's called Lessons from Life. I don't know if you heard it before.
No.
It says, a child that lives with ridicule will learn to be, you know, ridiculing other people.
Right.
A child that lives with criticism, they will learn to condemn other people.
Yeah.
So if they live with distrust, it says they'll be deceitful. If they live with affection, then they learn to love. If they're led to praise and to attend church, that's what they know because they learn what
Yes,
they live.
right.
And this is how their life is going to be. So that just reminded me of that. And that was just, part of that poem that says children learn what they live. They see everything and they hear everything that's happening in the house.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if you bring up your child and teach it what's right and wrong, even if it goes out there in the street,
Yes.
they will hesitate and think about, the consequences if they're taught
Yeah.
in the right concept of life.
You're right. You're right. We're going to take another quick break. This is going so fast. So before I want to ask something else, we're going to take a quick break. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Given how hard it is to raise teenagers in this day and age, Mrs. Ruffin is sharing with us how she was able to raise responsible adults today that are family men and women themselves. And during the break, you were telling me about your son and what he was able to go through and overcome due to your background.
Yes, he was out in the world experience, I guess, drugs or whatever. But he came to a conclusion one day that wasn't it.
Yeah.
And he turned to God, and he's been with him ever since.
Ever since. And you know what that says is for the parents out there, because some of the parents say, I do everything that's right.
Mm-hmm.
I say everything that's right, but I don't know what's going on with this kid. What you just said is hope, that when they have that background and they
Yes.
have that, let them go and experiment with the
Yeah.
world. But they will eventually come back because
Exactly.
they know where their
Exactly.
root is and they
Yep.
know where their comfort is. Or I think it's good to know for the parents to
Right.
know that
If-
you have to continue to do what you need to do.
Yep, if they're brought up in the right way, they will continue. Even though they want to experience things, they will continue, because I went to church, 3 churches every Sunday. I grew up, I sent my kids to church, and I was away from the church for a while.
Yes.
While I was working and bringing up kids, I didn't go to church, but now I'm back in the church again.
Yes. Yes. So then I know you worked at Eastern Bank. How many
Yes.
years was that?
17.
17 years. It's difficult today for people to even stay for 5 years, 3 years. How did you stay on the job? What are some of the pointers you can give the young people out there on staying on the job?
Well, I was a person who liked to work,
Okay.
and
That's
work was something that, I went to work every day. I did my job. I loved it. And I never thought of doing anything else. And I had to bring up my children,
Yeah.
and that was my bread and butter, too.
Yeah.
So I always went to work and did the job I was supposed to do.
Yes.
And I retired 2 months before I was 75, or else they threw me out. I don't know.
You retired.
Yeah.
You retired because there comes a time, because I think, what you share is something that, these young teenagers and young people need to understand, that when you're passionate and you love what you're doing, most likely you tend to have the passion to wake up every day and want to go to
Yep,
work, and people
exactly.
won't bother you because you know exactly what you're doing.
Yep.
And if you're asked to do something and it's something that you love and you know why you are there, you do it.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do it. And then, the money that you were getting, you were raising your children and you needed that money in order to pay for the rent, the bills, I'm sure. So you had to do what you had to do. Yeah. Any last words that you might want to share with those that are still growing up, the ones that will be parents at a young age from, your experience as a parent and as a grandmother?
All I can say is stay on the straight, narrow path. No matter how hard, and you're going to make it through. Keep your eyes on the good Lord and do as you're supposed to do.
I'm going to ask you to look at that camera and tell them, because that was powerful. Tell them again, looking at that camera, because that was powerful.
Stay on the straight, narrow path. Do what you're supposed to do and believe in God. And you will survive, and you will win the race, as they call it. I have never been defeated in my life. I can never look back and say, oh, what's the word I want to say? Defeated.
Yes.
But not, you know, when you get
you
depressed.
failed.
I've never been depressed. I've just kept right on going and doing what I'm supposed to do. There's days when you're depressed, but you get over it.
Yes.
As long as you believe in what you're doing and you have somebody upstairs there looking after you. So all I can say is keep trying. Don't give up the ship.
Yes, yes. It's been such a pleasure having you here, and even just on the set itself, it's been so quiet and just smooth, and it shows that we do have that higher power with us today on the show, just guiding us and, you know, looking over us. So
Yes.
I want to thank
This
you
is
for
true.
bringing that peacefulness, you know, on the show today. How was it for you?
Good.
You see? So for those of you that are afraid to come on TV and become guests, you've seen it. Mrs. Ruffin was here today and she said, I didn't know what to expect. And here she is going, how was the experience? She said, good. So I hope you've had some great experience with us on the show today. Thank you for watching the DrStem Show.